Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to my next election prediction video for the 2022 midterms, which are now less than 3 weeks away. We have less than 17 days now until the 2022 midterm elections on November 8th of this year. It's getting really close. It's been a long journey, guys, and I'm getting really excited. you know, we're starting to see a lot of new polling data come out. We're getting polls daily now. We're seeing a lot more from every state, and a lot definitely has changed. I know that I was supposed to do technically a governor's election prediction, this week because I'm technically due for my every other week update. But I decided there has been quite a bit that's changed on the Senate front. Well, not too much, but there has been, a bit of change on the Senate front, and not so much on the governor front. So I figured, you know what, Senate videos are usually shorter, and yeah, hope you guys are having a great weekend, and yeah, we are so close. Let's get right into it. So, as a preview, there has been a little bit that's changed, actually, quite a bit. So, Joe Biden's approval has gone down since our last prediction last week on the 15th. It's not particularly worse. He's disapproved of by 12. He was disapproved of by 10. So he's still holding steady. He's doing a lot better than he was this summer, but still, there was a reduction. But the major thing that happened is, we've seen a lot of races narrow up, such as Pennsylvania, Arizona a little bit, Nevada, Georgia, and New Hampshire. So there has been some reversion towards Republicans in some of these races. Some of them have become more solid for them. Yeah, and let's look at the generic ballot. So big news. On Thursday, Republicans took, so what I'll say is over the last week, Democrats have been slowly but surely declining in the generic ballot, which is, of course, the House, basically, the House popular vote. This is the average of all those polls put together, and we've seen a lot of reversion towards Republicans. They've been leading in almost every single poll for the last couple of weeks, and Democrats have been going down, and eventually got to the point where on Thursday, Republicans retook the lead in the generic ballot for the first time in over 2 months. They've broken Democrats' consistent lead in the generic ballot. It is very narrow. It is nowhere close to where they were in 2010 or 2014, but there is a clear reversion towards Republicans. It gives them a better chance in the House and a better chance at the Senate. So, this does not mean that the Democrats are out for sure. I still think that they have a very good chance to win the Senate. I think that the House is, while they do have a better chance than they did 6 months ago, their chances have declined. And, if we look at the models for the Senate, it has become, a dead heat. It is very, very close now. And in the last week, it has dropped for Democrats, quite a bit. On last Saturday, it was at 65%. Now it's pretty much a dead heat with, Democrats and Republicans, pretty much at 50-50, which would mean Democrats win the Senate. They still have a very small advantage. The House, though, has moved back towards the GOP as we've seen, the generic ballot become more, get better for them, which makes sense. Democrats' best showing was, at the end of September going into October when they had about a 2 in 3 chance of winning the House. Now Republicans, aren't doing too much better. Democrats, are still not at that abysmal, 12% margin that they were at the beginning of the summer, but they're certainly going down. And the House, I think it's going to take a lot for the Democrats to win it. I don't think they're going to win the House. I think they have a chance at the Senate, but yeah, let's get right into it. So we're going to start with the safe Democratic and Republican states. I'm not going to go over pretty much any of them. I think that it's pretty clear. You guys have been watching for a while. These are the safest states. They really have no chance of going either way. They'll go to their respective parties by 15% margins or over 15% margins. Missouri has gotten, a bit interesting. The independent John Wood dropped out of the race, and Trudy Bush Valentine has been running a good campaign for a Democrat in Missouri. But the polls in the state are very wonky, and Eric Schmidt is a pretty good candidate. He is not Eric Greitens. I think if Eric Greitens had won the nomination, this would be likely, maybe even lean R. But yeah, Missouri, I think, is going to be pretty like an 17, 18 point victory for Eric Schmidt. He's the attorney general of the state. He knows how to win there. In Missouri's traditionally Republican state now. Um, and in Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal has been struggling. We've seen quite some interesting polls that show him only up by just I think it was like um 11 points or something like that. 12 points. Yeah, it's become very interesting how Leora Levy has been able to surge in some of these pollsters, but Connecticut is Connecticut. I think it'll be closer than 2016. But I still expect Blumenthal to outperform his polling. I think he'll win by just over 15 points. Republicans do not have a chance in Connecticut. It might be likely at the end of the day, but I think Blumenthal, is a pretty strong incumbent. I think the only way this would really be likely is if the governor's race became a lot closer, and it doesn't really seem like Bob Stefanowski is making too many gains in Connecticut. Although I might be wrong about that. Let me look. I haven't looked at the Connecticut governor's race in quite a bit. Yeah, there really hasn't been much reversion towards Stefanowski. Blumenthal and Lamont are at 50 are both at above 50% in the polling aggregate, and they're probably going to win by more. So yeah, so Connecticut's going to be solid. Now we're going to get into the likely states. New York's not toss up, sorry. So we're going to get into the likely states, which are going to go to either party by over five between 5 and 15 percentage points. They're not particularly competitive, but they have the potential to become more competitive. We're going to start off with the state of Washington. Patty Murray is easily going to win her reelection, but she did have a competitive Senate race back in 2010 when she only defeated her Republican opponent Dino Rossi by about 5 points, a lot smaller than the usual margins that Democrats get in the state of Washington. But that being said, Tiffany Smiley, is not running the best campaign. I think that Murray is undeniably going to outperform her. I think well, I don't know if she's going to outperform her polling data. It's been quite interesting seeing that she's only up by 9 points right now. I think Tiffany Smiley was the best recruit for the GOP, but she did pretty badly in the blanket primary, which is usually 4 to 6 points redder than the general election. But we've seen some pretty accurate pollsters showing the race under 15%. I think it'll be like 13 or 14 points for Patty Murray. I think she'll outperform her polling data in the state, but it will be closer than 2020. And I wouldn't be surprised if Washington was a little bit closer, but I don't think it'll be single digits. And I do not buy these Trafalgar polls that show the race like within 5 points. I think that that's ridiculous. Republicans won't win Washington, but they will come closer, I think, than usual. The next likely state is Colorado. Michael Bennet is definitely going to win his reelection. Joe O'Dea is a very good candidate for the Republican Party, but it's still a Biden plus 14-point state. It's trending heavily to the left. Jared Polis on the ballot is going to help Bennet. In Colorado, polls similar to Nevada actually underestimate Democrats. I think the only time in recent history when it's been the opposite was in Bennett's last election in 2016. I think Bennett is up by, what's it, 7 points, I think, from what I remember? 9 points, yeah. So he's been doing pretty well. I expect him to win, by about the same margin. I think O'Dea is going to make improvements in the Denver suburbs. He'll probably do worse in the rural areas, but Colorado's still a blue state. It is, it will be a safe blue state by the end of, and by the end of the decade. O'Dea has a chance to make this race closer, but it's still going to go to the Democrats. Um, and New Hampshire, I think, is the final likely Democratic state. I could see it being lean because Don Bolduc is, a better than expected candidate, I think, for the GOP, in my opinion. I don't think that he's good. I think he's still, pretty lackluster. I think Chuck Morse or Chris Sununu or even Kelly Ayotte would have been a much better candidate for the GOP. But New Hampshire does like to swing all over the place. Maggie Hassan's not the most popular senator, but she's won in red wave years before, and, it's looking like it's going to be a Republican leaning year. I don't think we're going to see a major red wave in 2022. I think that um it's going to be like a slight red wave year, like I was saying back in the summer. I kind of changed my tune as we saw some more favorable polling towards Democrats, and I said it's going to be a pretty neutral year. I think it's going to be a slight red wave. New Hampshire, though, Hassan's is a very strong incumbent. She, defeated Kelly Ayotte in 2016, an electoral juggernaut. It was pretty much, it was a silver lining for Democrats in a year in which they kind of fell flat on their faces. 2016 wasn't a terrible year for Democrats, but it certainly was pretty underwhelming, considering that they lost the presidency, the House, and the Senate. So yeah, New Hampshire is going to be likely. Could see it being lean because of how close it can sometimes get, but its polling data is usually pretty accurate, and they have had, I think 538 has Hassan up by, I think it's 7 points. Yeah, so I think that she's going to. Oh, wait, this is Florida. Sorry about that. We'll look at Florida in just a second. Yeah, New Hampshire, I think, is going to be pretty. Is it going to be a pretty large margin for Hassan? Even Don Bolduc's own pollster, or not his own pollster, but his own campaign poll has him down by 2 points. Trafalgar has him down by 3 points. I really don't see a path for Republicans in New Hampshire. It could be closer. I think it could be under 5 points, but right now I'm leaning towards it being like 5.5, 6 points for Maggie Hassan. So yes, I think New Hampshire's, Democrats are going to have a pretty good year here. And I think, the GOP really messed up with their candidates. If Chris Sununu had been the nominee in New Hampshire, this race would be lean to likely R. Or if it was Chuck Morse or Kelly Ayotte, it'd be, a pure toss-up, but Don Bolduc was the worst choice they could have, was the worst candidate they could have nominated. And unfortunately for the Republicans, they do seem, that's exactly what they did. And that it's also, New Hampshire's going through, a similar situation, it seems, as to Arizona, where, Republicans are slowly pulling, canceling ad buys in the state. It's not sure if they're going to attempt, if they're going to, pull the same pull in Arizona in here, where they, cancel all the ad buys like they did for Blake Masters, but, it's a very similar situation. And yeah, I think that New Hampshire's, Republicans are already starting to pull out of it, I think. Or, it's pretty clear that they are, and, I think that most pundits have realized that Hassan is going to win. I'd be very shocked if this race is, if this race goes to the Republicans. So now we'll go to the likely red states. First one is the state of Iowa. While Republicans have been doing better, in Iowa in recent years and in the country, and have been surging nationwide recently, Iowa's actually gotten a little bit closer. Chuck Grassley, while he has, been a very, popular senator in the past, and, he's been able to win by these extremely large margins, he's only up by 7 points against Michael Franken. And in this Seltzer and Co poll, which this is the pretty much the absolute best pollster, in Iowa's, out of any pollster in Iowa, they were the only people that said Trump was going to win Iowa pretty convincingly in 2020, when everyone else had it as a dead heat. They were wrong in 2018. They said Fred Hubble would win against Kim Reynolds, which may explain why Grassley is only up by 3 points. But at the same time, Seltzer, if you go to 538's, pollster ratings, it's actually the highest rated pollster out of any pollster, out of any on here. And, I would not be surprised if Grassley won by less than 10 points. I think that he will win by, over 10, but I think it'll be under 15. I think we'll see like an 11 or 12 point victory for the incumbent Republican. Michael Franken's running a good campaign, but Iowa is Iowa. It's moving to the right, but Grassley's old age is clearly, a problem for him in this race, and that poll that showed that over 2/3 of Iowans did not want Grassley to run again, I think is definitely having an impact on this race. The next likely state is the state of Florida. It's looking really bad for Democrats with the early vote data. I do think Val Demings will do better than Charlie Crist at the end of the day. But Marco Rubio is a very strong incumbent, and while Val Demings, I hear, had a pretty good debate performance, and I think that she's a decent candidate for minority voters, Rubio is an awful either. He even before Republicans were doing pretty well with Hispanics, with and we're making gains in in that demographic group. Rubio, um, was already winning over a lot of those voters. He can be a polarizing figure, but he's not necessarily the most polarized. And I think Rubio, while he has his controversies, he is a very good candidate for the state of Florida. Objectively, I don't like Marco Rubio personally. I really wish that Val Demings had a chance, but I mean, Ron DeSantis is going to help Rubio, and I think that they're both going to win by, I think that Rubio could win by less than 10, but I think it's going to be like 10-11 for Rubio, and then about 12 for DeSantis. It's going to be a pretty, good year for Florida Republicans, and the Florida Democratic Party has messed up so many times in the past, and even though the race is kind of close right now, I just, I don't buy it. Florida polls always overestimate Democrats. They have Biden winning the state by almost 3 points. He lost it by 3 points. So even though Val Demings is a strong candidate for minority voters, I don't think that she's going to win. I don't think she really has a chance. And I've been pretty solid on Republicans' chances in Florida. There was a time when I thought that maybe it would be closer, back in at the end of August and early September when we saw that Rubio was struggling, but that is clearly not the case anymore. The final likely state is a change from last time. It's the state of Ohio. I get that J.D. Vance, is struggling and that Tim Ryan's a good candidate, but when you look, at the polls in Ohio in past years, even in midterm years, they have been widely inaccurate. Midterm years have been better for them for polls in Ohio, but Vance is up by the same amount that Trump was at the end of 2020. Tim Ryan, while he is a very strong candidate, and I think he will undoubtedly um, outperform Joe Biden, I still think that, the polling error in Ohio, I think, is going to be at least 5 or 6 points for JD Vance. I think he'll win by about 5.5, 6 points at the end of the day. He's not the best candidate. Republicans should have chosen someone better. Tim Ryan has definitely attracted a lot of attention nationwide, but we have to remember that Ohio's polling errors are pretty noticeable. And, with Republicans gaining nationwide, I do think that that means that Vance will win by over 5 points. So now we're going to go to these six toss-up states. These are really the most competitive states, some more competitive than others, undoubtedly. We're going to start out with the lean states for either party. We got two lean states for both parties. These are states that are pretty competitive, but are, a party has a pretty clear lead in these states. They'll go to either party by over 1 to 5 points. We're going to start off with the lean Republican states. North Carolina is the first for the GOP. Ted Budd has been, doing a lot better in the polls recently. Sherry Beasley is a very strong candidate, and I think that she can do very well with black turnout in the state compared to other Democrats. They've been running a lot of white candidates, for Senate. And Beasley did outperform Joe Biden on the presidential level in 2020. Joe Biden's performance on the presidential level 2 years ago. But she still ended up losing. Ted Budd is, while he does have, some issues with his, while I think that he could definitely be, you know, um, hurting himself in the suburbs with his abortion comments, and with North Carolina, being more Democratic down ballot, and both parties kind of ignoring this race. I think that gives Beasley a pretty good chance, especially if she can run up the numbers in a 20 in a in a lot of the the major urban cities like Raleigh and Charlotte. But at the end of the day, it's North Carolina. Polls always overestimate Democrats in North Carolina, and I think that they're going to lose it by around 3 points. I think that, Democrats are definitely making gains in the state. They won the House popular vote in 2020, and I think that they'll, have a pretty good year here. I think that, Sherry Beasley definitely has a future in the state, but honestly, I don't think that 2022 is that year. I think Bud will win by around 3 or 4 points. And the other lean state is Wisconsin. Ron Johnson still holds a pretty big lead over Mandela Barnes. Polls in Wisconsin do tend to overestimate Democrats by quite a bit. But in 2018, the polls were pretty accurate, and honestly, I don't buy Ron Johnson winning by close to 10 points. I think that Barnes is a good candidate for Madison and Milwaukee, but he's not that great for the suburbs. I think that he is going to drag down Tony Evers at the top of the ticket. I think Republicans, being in Wisconsin, have really made gains in the state. Ron Johnson's won before, and while I do think he'll do worse in WoW and in Milwaukee and Madison than he did in 2016 because of turnout, I do think that he's going to do a lot better in the rural areas and in some of the suburbs. So I think that he's going to win by close to 4. I don't see how Mandela Barnes comes back at this point. He had a very good chance. I had this race as tilt blue just over a month ago because, of that Trafalgar poll that came out showing Barnes ahead, which was pretty surprising. But all of those pollsters that showed Barnes with a pretty significant lead have all reverted to Johnson. The GOP is really, helping out Johnson now because they got spooked by that Trafalgar poll that showed them down. So I think that Johnson's going to be all right. It's upsetting. I really don't like Ron Johnson, but he's probably going to win a third term in the Senate. I don't see how Mandela Barnes comes back at this point. Now we got the two lean Democratic states. First one is Arizona. Mark Kelly is still holding the race has definitely narrowed up, but not so much as say Pennsylvania. I still think that Blake Masters is a pretty bad candidate for the GOP. He had an okay debate performance, but he is still down in even Republican pollsters. Kelly, here's the thing that a lot of people forget about Arizona. In 2018, Martha McSally was supposed to win her Senate race. Kirsten Sinema won it by 2 points. So, while Mark Kelly did underperform his polls by quite a bit in 2020, we have to remember that Arizona's polling errors are for the most part, aren't too large, and sometimes they're even Republican favor. They're the polls even have a Republican bias. I do think that Kelly's going to win by around the same amount he did in 2020. I think that he's a very strong candidate. He's getting dragged down by Katie Hobbs in the governor's race, and Masters is clearly making gains, but he's not a good candidate for the GOP. If Mark Brnovich was the candidate, this race would be in the toss-up column for sure. It's definitely not over for Masters yet. I think that he can come back and win, but I think out of these four states, I'm the most confident in Democrats. In Arizona, well, I think Georgia, I'm slightly more confident, but Arizona, Mark Kelly is probably going to win re-election by about 2.5 points. I think that Masters is an atrocious candidate for the suburbs, and I just don't think that Democrats really need to. They obviously need to worry about Arizona. Don't neglect it. I think that Kelly, definitely, does not have this race locked down. He's definitely dropping in the polls, but that was always expected. We're getting closer to the election. But at the same time, it really hasn't been that much of a surge towards Masters. So I do think that Kelly will still win here. Could be wrong, but I do think, that Arizona is going to stay blue and Kelly will get his first 6 year term. In Georgia, Raphael Warnock is definitely going to win at this point. I think, well, I mean, I won't say definitely because there is still a chance that Herschel Walker wins, but he had a terrible debate performance. I mean, anyone who's saying that he did well in that debate, I don't understand. He waved out a freaking fake police badge. He's getting, and that was really, a trap set by Warnock. I think, it was a pretty, it is, it does make sense what unbiased election predictions said in that one podcast that Warnock was tempting Walker to to pull out the police badge and make him look like a fool. That's why he said, at least I haven't pretended to lie about my service in the police. And Walker's scandals, while he does seem to be coming back a little bit in some of the polls. And he is dropping. He is still probably in his worst position that he's ever been in. He's better than he was at the beginning of the month. Warnock did have a surge, but that surge really hasn't gone away. I think that Warnock is going to be okay in Georgia. I think that there is a very good chance that he wins outright. If it does go to a runoff, I still think that Warnock will win. If Republicans do win the Senate this year, if they do, win the Senate, without Georgia, and Georgia goes to a runoff, that could be more concerning because there'd be less people, enthused to vote. But I don't think that Walker is going to do very well in a runoff either. I think that Raphael Warnock is the pretty clear favorite in the state of Georgia right now. Could be wrong. Walker can still come back, but I think that there's a very good chance that Warnock avoids a runoff, and I don't think that Walker will get over 50% on election day. Even, Republican pollsters, even Trafalgar, which was wrong by 5 points in 2020, has Walker down by 2 points. So, that's pretty substantial. The only pollster that's recently had him up is his own internal pollster, is his own internal poll, and he only is up by 2 points. Even Insider Advantage has Warnock up, so, I really do think that Democrats are going to win Georgia. If it does go to a runoff, I think that they're in an even better position. That could get a little bit dicey if turnout drops for Democrats in a runoff, but I don't think that it will. I think that if anything, Republican turnout will drop. But the suburbs are not going to be too kind to Walker. I think that even Kelly Loeffler is going to do what that Kelly Loeffler is going to would have done better in the suburbs, even, and she was a terrible candidate, but Walker I think is even worse. So Georgia could still flip to the GOP, but I'm pretty confident that Warnock is going to win, and I think that there is a pretty the highest chance that there's really ever been that he wins outright. I think that there's a very good chance that this race just that Warnock gets over 50% on election day. Walker's campaign has really fallen apart, and Warnock has definitely got a lot of money, and he's running a very effective campaign. He's not taking anything for granted. So now we got the last two states, the toss-ups. These are the true toss-up states. These are the tilt states that will go to either party by under 1% percentage point. Not to say that these other states aren't close, that aren't safe, or that are lean, but you know, these states are, Nevada and Pennsylvania are really going to be the two closest states, in my opinion. We're going to start off with Nevada. I do still think that Adam Laxalt has a narrow advantage over Cortez Masto. I understand that Nevada is a state where polling usually underestimates Democratic support, but, when you look at Steve Sisolak losing in the governor's race to Joe Lombardo, when you look at the fact that Adam Laxalt, unlike a lot of other Republican candidates this cycle, has actually, won a statewide election in, his home state before, he's proven to the voters, that he's proven to us that he is someone who can win in the state. He did have an underwhelming win in 2014 for his attorney general's race, and he did lose the 2018 governor's race. But Nevada is not as blue as some people may think. Hispanics are trending to the right at a pretty significant rate. I think that abortion, while it is very, while Nevada is a very pro-choice state, Laxalt and Lombardo really don't seem to have been too affected by it. Nevada voters rate the economy as their top issue, and while I still think Cortez Masto has a very good chance, she does seem to have come back a little bit since our last prediction, but at the same time, she's still down in the polling aggregate, and Nevada has been voting to the right of the nation for the last 4 years. Even in 2018, Steve Sisolak underperformed Democrats nationwide. If you go back to 2016, you can see that Hillary Clinton did better than she did nationwide. In 2012, Barack Obama did better in Nevada than he did nationwide. Same in in 2008. So Nevada's clearly making a trend towards the right. It is a pretty stagnant state, but the economy is really bad there. And it was never very good to begin with. Cortez Masto is a very good incumbent. She's got a lot of money, but I do think that Laxalt, being, a pretty good candidate, I do think, is going to win this race. And I think it's going to be very close. It's a complete toss up, but I do think that he will eke out a victory in the end. And the final state, the state of Pennsylvania. I had this as lean D last time. Fetterman has, Oz has really been surging in Pennsylvania. He went from, in a week, he's gone from being down 5 points to being down just two. He has led in his first poll ever, and I saw this today. Even Echelon Insights, which had Fetterman, which is a pretty Democratic biased pollster, which had Fetterman up by 21 just a month ago, or a little over a month ago, they only have Fetterman up by 3. Oz, while he is a carpetbagger, while he is not the best candidate that the GOP could have put up, and while I still think that Fetterman has a very good chance, he can definitely do better than Biden in, Western Pennsylvania, and I think he will. Oz, I think, is favored. This is a first. I think that Pennsylvania, this is the first time I've put Pennsylvania in the Republican column throughout any of my predictions. I had it, even back when I had Republicans favored to win the Senate in May, I had it as tilt to lean D. I think that while Dr. Oz is a really, lackluster candidate for the GOP, he clearly, has been attacking John Fetterman on his health issues in ways that I think, are pretty unethical. But at the same time, he's been, unlike a lot of these other candidates and some of these other Senate races, Oz has been, well, I mean, not unlike these other candidates, but Oz has especially been able to catch up to Fetterman. I think that while Democrats have a very good chance in Pennsylvania, I do think that right now they're not the favorites. I think John Fetterman right now, even though he may benefit from the polls in Pennsylvania, not being as inaccurate as they were in 2020, I still think that he is going to lose this race very narrowly. I don't think the debate is going to be good for him. I think that there's still a very good chance that he wins, I don't think Oz is a particularly good candidate for the suburbs, but I do think he'll make improvements off of Trump. I think he'll do better in eastern Pennsylvania, slightly worse in western Pennsylvania, but he has clearly gotten a lot of Republican voters to come home to him. Fetterman, has been, campaigning quite a bit, but, he has clearly been dropping in recent weeks. He is clearly, he is clearly having a lot of issues on the campaign trail, and I think if there's one state where the debate will make a huge impact on the race, I think that it's Pennsylvania. So right now, I do think that Dr. Oz has the smallest of leads in Pennsylvania for the first time ever. I think that it's not going to be called on election night. I think it's going to be extremely close. It's razor thin, could go really either way. But I do think the Republicans have a very narrow advantage in Pennsylvania. And so, with Pennsylvania flipping or staying red, and Nevada flipping red to Adam Laxalt, for the first time in 5 months, I think that the Republican Party is going to win control of the United States Senate. I've had Democrats as the favorites for quite a bit. In my last prediction, it was 50-50. Before that, 51 to 49. Then it was 52, to 48 back in, September at the beginning of September. The Republicans have clearly made a lot of gains nationwide, and while I don't think it's going to be a massive red wave year, I do think that they are in a position where they, are more likely than not going to win a very small majority in the U.S. Senate. This is something the Democrats need to be scared of. I think that, especially in Pennsylvania, Democrats really need to start campaigning for Fetterman more. I think that, you know, there's definitely, a very good chance that he loses. I do think that he would lose if the election was held right now. He has very much dropped in the polling data. Democrats have been struggling in Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia have gotten a little bit closer, but I still do think that they are, going to stay blue. But in Pennsylvania, I really don't see Fetterman being the favorite right now. And with that, I do think the Republicans holding on to all of their seats and, including Pennsylvania, as well as flipping Nevada, are going to have a 51 to 49 majority in the U.S. Senate as of right now. This could change, or Democrats can still come back, but I think that as of right now, Republicans have the narrowest of advantages in the Senate. So, yeah. So, I know that there are going to be some of you who disagree with this prediction. There are going to be some of you who agree with it. I still think the Democrats have a very good chance in the Senate. I may, move Pennsylvania back into the Democratic column if we see Fetterman doing better. But as of right now, I do think that the GOP has the narrowest of advantages in Pennsylvania and Nevada. I do think that they still lose Arizona and Georgia, although those races are tightening. I think that they hold on to Wisconsin, Ohio, and North Carolina. And so, with that, I do believe Republicans will win the Senate. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy. Share the video, turn on notifications so you don't miss another one. Check out my non-political channel, Interactive127, which will be getting more content after the midterms. But don't worry, I won't abandon this channel either. We're getting so close to the midterms, guys. If you do disagree with this prediction, make sure to comment down below what you disagree with on this map. But be civil about it, obviously. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.